Greetings and welcome back to Game Design. This is lesson 14, Conditionals, and this is the next major computer programming concept. So our first one was variables. That's very important to programming, the ability to store information that you can retrieve later. But now we're going into conditionals, which kind of makes computer science with if this, then this, right? That's really how the programming gets going, making it look like it's actually doing something, is the ability for conditionals. And in our case, building games, if the target is touching the sprite, if you're past the wall, right? If you get hit by an object, the score goes up, right? These conditions that you don't want the code to run unless that is true. So we are going to learn the code that we use for that. Eventually we'll learn some other ways to become true. But the first thing we need to start off with is this concept of Boolean, right? What is true or false? How do you evaluate true or false? There's many different ways that we're going to see, but we got to start off the first piece of this. So with that, we'll go to the prediction. Go ahead and watch the videos and come back to this if you need to. But first things first, right? We want to look at these console logs. So you can go ahead and pause here and try to figure it out yourself and then run it. And there's actually questions at the bottom to see if you're right. But it's console log. It'll show up here if you didn't know that. But let's take a look at it, right? So hopefully you already know the answer, but let's take a look anyway. Sprite 1, Y, and remember X and Y, so that's this one. And then sprite 2Y is this one, right? So 200 and 200. Is 200 equal to 200? True, right? That is true. So that was one of the options down here. And then the next one is sprite 1X, that's that one, greater than sprite 2X. Is 100 greater than 300? False. So we got true, false. And then the last one is sprite X, which is still 100, and sprite 2Y, which is 200. So 100 less than 200, that's true. So I'm seeing true, false, true. Let's see if that's one of the answer. True, false, true. Run it. And true, false, true. So that's Boolean, right? Being true or false. And there's a little bit more to Boolean than that, being of two states. But the point is, for our purposes, it's true or false, right? True or false. And this second concept is evaluation, right? We can evaluate it. Now, a lot of the times we won't necessarily need to compare sprites, but we might need to do is sprite.y greater than 400, right? Did it go off the edge? Is it going this way? And then see down there, the y is 398, and then boom, right? It's past the edge. That is true or false. So we need to be able to evaluate. And as I mentioned before, there'll be the sprite is touching target. There are things that just evaluate true or false. But for now, all right, the important thing is being able to do these equations, right? So there's a video. You can watch it now if you haven't watched it already. So in that case, pause. We're going to jump on to number 3, which is a quick check. And a lot of times, this is kind of how you have to think about it, right? You say, is the sprite out of bounds, right? Is the sprite off the bottom of it? But that's not how you really would took it, right? You need to be able to change it into actual code. So is the dog sprite rotation less than the sprite rotation? As an example. So go ahead, pause here, do this, and then we'll go ahead and see how it works, right? So hopefully paused. Is the rotation less than, so dog rotation less than cat rotation? Is the dog sprite X less than the cat sprite X? So we'll look for the less than. Is the dog sprite X less than the cat sprite X? All right. Is the cat sprite scale greater than the cat sprite? So the dog's greater than, all right? So that's voiced the right way. Is the dog sprite's X greater than the cat sprite X? Right? Dog X greater than the cat X. All right. Is the dog sprite equal to the sprite X? All right. So again, this is what you say, right? And then this is how you code it. So apparently you got it right. We'll move on to number 4. All right. In this case, we're going to draw a race car. It wants to go across the finish line. So when we run this, the race car just kind of goes off the edge. Now we'll talk about stopping things and starting things and stuff like that if this is pressed. There's whole things like if a button's pressed. We'll get to those. But for now, We just want to see if we can detect it, right? We just want to say if it can detect it. So we want to be able to say console log and then math, and then we want to say, all right, because it's going this way, so 400. So if it's less than, so if the race car X, so if the race car X is less than, let's say 50 or something. Let's say 100. So when it kind of crosses the race line. So it's 400, it's 300, it's 200, it's 100, and then it should be crossing the finish line. So now this is in the draw function, so this is going to run the whole time. So let's go ahead and reset and run it. False, 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 right? Because it's not less than 100. And pretty soon, there we go, right? When the middle of it crosses, because remember sprites are in the middle of it, so the middle of the car crossed that finish line, it became true, and it's going to keep going true. So that's a good start. Let's move on and see what it wants us to do next. All right, so we're on number 5 now. Now we're entering the if statement, right? And this is that piece of the conditional. If this code is true, now that we know and hopefully understand true and false, we need to understand the if statement, only if the code is true. So I want you to look through this code first, and I want you to go ahead, pause, and write it up and run it. All right, so hopefully we're coming to the same conclusion. You got this right. If the car is less than 100, right, that's the code we have. This is true or false. So when it's false at the beginning, right, it's false, nothing happens, right? And as soon as it becomes true, then this happens. So let's go and run this again. See, nothing's happening, nothing's in the console log. And then it's about to get to the 100, and now it's saying winner, 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 right? It crossed the finish line. Now we can do stuff. This is where we could stop it or as we go, and we'll actually take a look at that, right? So we can do an else statement as well. All right, we can actually type on this one, right? This is the thing you need to do. Just remember though, if this is on the outside, it's always going to keep going, right? So one more video. Again, go ahead and watch the video if you haven't already, and then jump back into our next lesson. So this is the last piece, right? Last piece before you're going to go off and do your practice. So in this case, bars fruit creates fruit, right? So we want to make it so if it's greater than 2, it changes to a pair. Now I'm going to show you some things in this, right? So we run it, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it needs to change to a thing. So control has our if statement. We'll pull the if statement in, and I'm going to tab. All right, so we have to actually put the if statement, right? So if fruit.scale is greater than 2, now this is going to take, I'm going to put 1 because 2 takes a long time to get to. I remember this one already. And then we're going to set the animation of fruit to pair. This is why it's important, as I mentioned before, to name these nice and simple so it's easy to type in here what you have. So let's run this one more time. All right, so apple goes, as soon as we get to scale 1, it turns to a pair. All right, now here is what we can do too, right? We can make it so it only goes up if it's less than this, right? So I'm going to add an else. Squiggly bracket, enter. So again, to create an if statement, it's if, parentheses, whatever you're evaluating, squiggly bracket, your code that runs if it's true, and then squiggly bracket. Now we'll go over more. There's if, else, but for now we have if, and then we're going to add an else. So if this is true, it changes to a pair. Else, it's going to make it grow bigger, right? So let's go ahead and drag this line of code into here. So now we've made a way to actually stop it, right? You can see the pair is still getting bigger. Let's go ahead and run it. It's getting bigger, it's getting bigger, it's getting bigger, and pair, and it stops growing, right? Because it's no longer less than 1, right? It's greater than 1, so it changes to a pair. And technically it's changing to a pair every single time, but that's fine. it's no longer growing. So these are ways that you can use to control what you're trying to do with your function. So you might find some of this as you go through it. It likes to add stuff. And as I mentioned, you can even have an else if here, and then else ifs do require a actual thing. So if requires a valuation, else if requires an evaluation, and then else is if this is this too. So I'm going to go ahead and make this here, and let's do 0.5. So as soon as it gets greater than 0.5, it's going to go ahead and do that. So we want to make sure, and I think I have these in the wrong order for now, but for now this will work. We want it when it's greater than 0.5. Actually, we're going up, so this is the right order. We want it to, we're going to want to make it go fast and then slow down. So let's make it go fast. And you may not be able to see this really quickly because it probably happened fast, but there you go. So you saw it fairly well, right? So fast, slow, and then stop and change. All right, so you can, when it's less than 0.5, it goes up fast. And then when it gets to 0.5, it goes it goes slower, and then when it gets over 1, it stops completely, right? Because we no longer have this piece of code in there, right? Another thing to think about if statements, they all run as 1. So the very first thing that's true, and that's why I said I might have this in the wrong order. The very first thing that's true is true, right? If I had this one above this one, right? If I had the else if above it, 1 is greater than 0.5. However, it'll never get there, right? Because 0.5, if I did this, 0.5, and then I did this 1, right? And I run this, right? It changed to a pair, but it never slowed down, right? Really fastly went to it. So those are things you need to understand about how this works. All right, the rest of this time is yours. Go ahead and finish the practice, the assessment, and the challenges. Get those put into the worksheet. I just wanted to kind of show you how the if statement works as we're moving through this, and all the little pieces. And you can do as much code in there as you want. There, whatever you need. The if statement just allows you to do if this is true, execute this code, else if this is true, in any order. I don't need an else statement here. You can have an if, else if, else if, else if. You can have as many of these as you want as well. Again, just depending on whatever you're trying to do for your code. And there are times where maybe 2 if statements make sense. All right, so again, whatever you need to do to make your code work, this is how it works. With that, that's all I have. We'll see you next lesson.